Welcome to a continuation in my series on the symbols on the Magician's card. Let's take a look at the Magician's belt, an Ouroboros, a snake encircling itself, seemingly eating its own tail, a representation of eternity, of not just opposites but resolution of opposites, bringing things together. The Ouroboros represents the alchemical work, being circular and self-contained. Notice it surrounds his waist. It's internal, aligned to his Waite inner functions. When the snake comes together, eating its tail, it represents continuity and constancy of the changing cosmos. Things change. Things remain the same. Like the lemniscate, which we will discuss in a bit, the symbol overtop the magician's head, the Ouroboros represents the infinite nature of energy and the importance of not just manipulation but proper manipulation with intent of that energy. It represents rebirth and regeneration. The magician understands that birth occurs in each moment, and that is a source, perhaps the greatest source, of his power. The Ouroboros represents one is all, and all is one. Perhaps the highest philosophy of the magician. This Ouroboros, which circles his Waite, is the belt, which is not a belt. Rather than a belt, it would be considered a cincture, that which surrounds and encircles. Its power is what it holds, what it protects, what it encompasses, the Waite essence of the magician. Let's take a look at the table in front of the magician. 3 symbols appear to be carved on the edge of the table. The first appears to be a seascape and possibly represents water. The second seems to be a representation of the element of fire. And the third is a dove, a Christian symbol for the Holy Spirit, the divine force that's beyond the physical elements and therefore the 5th element. When I journaled on this a long time ago, it happened to be I was also studying the wisdom Shekinah. The dove is also the symbol for the Shekinah, which would link this card to that wisdom as it appears in cards along the Fool's Journey. A Christian friend once told me that the power of the dove as he saw it was as a symbol of reconciliation. The dove on the card is pointing upwards, looking at the items on the table, and my friend suggested the image then of the dove was a symbol of the power of bringing together all of the items on the table. The 5th element calling out to its parts, in a way. Another interesting possibility I read recently, that instead of water, what if the first panel and the symbols that look like they might be waves or water represent mountains, the mountains where the Fool has come from. The fire representation then would be his earthly transformation out of that experience of traveling through life, what he does align to his personal will, and then the outcome of that which connects him to the dove, the above, the greater experience of living, the purpose of living. At the top of the table leg there seems to be 3 letters which possibly spell V-I-N. If so, that would be Latin for wilt thou. It's certainly the question that the magician poses. He's going to create from his will. What will he do? Wilt thou? Those letters could also be D-I-N, and there's a couple of different meanings for what they might mean, including judgment and the gold of alchemy, which would again refer to the magician as the alchemist. And there's so many other interpretations of what Vin and Din might mean. Perhaps too many interpretations for me to have decided that any one of them resonate with me. The table leg itself, as a standalone, has some interesting symbolism. When I first saw this referenced as an ionic column, that led me to explore the symbolism of that column, as to me. Once I looked at illustrations of ionic columns, I realized it indeed looks just like one. In Freemasonry, which highly influenced Waite, there is symbolism in 3 different column styles: the Ionic, the Doric, and the Corinthian. Their symbolism being wisdom, strength, and beauty. In light of the symbolism of columns in later cards, which I think are a lot more obvious than this one, I tend towards this interpretation of the table leg as the Ionic column of wisdom. That's the great master's column in Freemasonry. A little bit of a quote here from Samuel Pritchard's 1730 book, Masonry, Dissected, which has a lot of information about the practice of the Freemasons. When he addressed the 3 columns, he did so by questioning, what supports a lodge? The answer is the 3 great pillars. And what are they called? Wisdom, strength, and beauty. Why so? Wisdom, to contrive; strength, to support; and beauty, to adorn. This to me matches the energy of the magician, the Ionic column of wisdom. Wisdom, to contrive, to make manifest the force of his will, to make it so. Therefore, that table leg remains a powerful symbol, an Ionic column, the column of wisdom and making manifest to me. The table itself, the acceptance of a 4-square form, a solid form standing steady, connected to the power of the number 4, a number which represents manifestation. The power of 4 is visited many more times in tarot. It's the power of the cubic stone, that which is honed to perfection, the perfect cube. It's worth to consider the table here as a 4-square symbol in the middle of a card, which is filled with the power of creation and rebirth, represented by the roses and the lilies. It is, in a way, seemingly out of place in this beautiful garden setting. It's a work of man, perhaps, then, representing the great work of man. This led me to journal that table. It presents the querent with all they need. It's a reminder we all have what we need. The elements being the key to explore and discover for ourselves with our own tools and through the deep experience of our living and what we choose to make manifest. Right there, in front of us, right there, part of each of our lives is everything we need. And if we brought this down, all these sometimes conflicting and sometimes maybe too esoteric to make sense in the moment symbols regarding the table on the magician's card, perhaps the most simple interpretations, not focusing on the etchings or the paintings on the table, they are at least the magician's connected to an outer wisdom, to some sense of history. Someone created that table, someone who came before him, and represents the wisdom, the construct, what was made manifest by those who came before him. It's the wisdom he's gathered in his life, And importantly, it's making something from that, the creation that comes from that. That table, it could be an altar, as powerful as an altar, life potential, or life about to become manifest through will. The power of declaring that within the natural world, the world around us, within the moments of our living. The table, representing what we've come knowing, what we have at hand, what we will choose to do with that. Indeed, our responsibility to do something with that. Here's something I had in my notes in a book that caused me to stop and think. After I made such an import of the table and what I've shared with you of the symbolism that I have read regarding it, what if the table is the magician's table of illusion? A distraction from what is really happening, which is happening in the form of the magician standing behind the table. What if it's a bit of sleight of hand, a misdirection? Look at this table. See how important it is? See how important every item, every etching, the shape and the form of it is? Well, the items on the table represent the elements of nature and perhaps the great work of life to come closer to mystery through the understanding and use of them. Is that an illusion? Is it much ado? A distraction? The magician stands firmly and securely behind them, the center, the magnetic center of this card, looking us straight in the eye. Could he be declaring, for those who will heed him, that we are what matters, that we have no need of the table and what is on it? He is, however, named the magician and probably has a trick or two up his sleeve. Is the table flash, smoke, and illusion? I hope you'll join me in a continuation of this series on the magician's symbols in its next video in the series.